Um, Hello, everyone. I'm Sam Yu from Lothan Space in Pasadena, California. So today I'll be talking about a multi-sensor fusion for Lunar Rover navigation. Our approach combined the camera-based terrain segmentation with LiDAR-based geometric mapping to build a traversability map for onboard autonomies. A lightweight UNet is one part of the system, and I'll mostly talk about that later. And the main goal for it is to fuse semantic and geometric information for safer local planning on a resource-constrained lunar platform. So I'll be covering the perception problem, the model, the fusion pipeline, and how it fits into a larger autonomy stacks. And the whole pipeline is open source, so I'll share the resource at the end. So the lunar perception, so before we get into the fusion architecture, I just want to quickly talk about basically the issue we are facing here. So first is the communication delay. Rover has to detect hazards and react onboard. And second, the lighting is extreme, especially near the poles. So the low sun angles creating long shadows, which can make visual interpretation unreliable. And third, no single sensor is enough. Camera providing a semantic context, but they are sensitive to lighting and appearance effects. And so LiDAR provides a geometry, but not terrain meaning. And finally, this is not a, it's for obstacle detection. The rover needs to distinguishing the surface, the rocks, craters, and slopes. So because these having different implications for planning. And so that's why we're using a sensor fusion to combine semantic understanding from vision with geometric information from LiDAR. And why lightweight matters here is because the rover is limited in the mass. We're talking about a 3U size kind of a small rover. And with its limited mass, power, and onboard compute, so the vision model has to fit inside these constraints. That rules out a lot of the larger backbones and push us towards a more compact segmentation model that can still run on real time on a Jetson class hardware. So we choose UNet because this is a terrain segmentation problems where the boundary quality really matters. The skip connection preserves the fine spatial details, which is important for things like crater edges and the rock boundaries, while the deeper layers still capture context. It also scales very well. It can simply to audit and to deploy, and it maps cleanly to Onyx and TensorRT for Jetson class hardwares. We did consider some alternatives like DeepLab V3 Plus and SegFormer, but these adds more compute and deploy complexities. And so we went with this use case. A raw patch classification CN is lighter, but it lost the boundary perception needed for planning. So the UNet gave us the best balance of accuracy, simplicity, and edge deployability. So this is the model architecture, and you can see why it is called a UNet. So you can basically break this into two halves. So the first half processes the image progressively smaller and in the compressed forms. And as it goes deeper, it captures broader structure and more abstract patterns. And the second half, and it goes into to reconstruct the image back to full resolutions. During that process, it combines the high-level information from the deeper layer with a fine visual detail preserved from earlier layer. That combination is what helps the model to produce a cleaner class boundaries. And at output, the model generates 4 class scores per pixel, 1 for each terrain categories. And one important design parameter is the model size. Control here flows through the base channels. So a large version can produce more detail, but it is also much heavier in memory and compute. So a smaller version preserves the same overall structure while using very fewer parameters. So for our system, we are targeting a smaller version with base channel set to 16. And the final model size is approximately about 3 megabytes. It is much lighter while still retaining the same UNet design and make a very practical candidate for Jetson class deployment. Next, I want to talk about basically our training strategies. So first, we are using synthetic data. It gives us a scale and control the variation in terrain, lighting, and hazard. So for our use case, we're using the Ishigami Lunar Robotic Labs data set from Keio University in Japan. And the second, because those data are not enough. And the information that there's a very limited information that's preserved in the synthetic data. So we were looking for ways to find the real lunar images, but those are very limited. There's not too many like recent lunar missions. And based on different programs, engineer suggestion, we were able to find some public data that's available. And then I have a group of high school students from Fremont, California to help creating the mask files. But the data set is still very limited. It's only approximately 250 images. And also, we're currently considering another scenario options to having a post-landing adaptation using very early image from the mission. So the last part is still a concept. It's haven't demonstrated any result yet, but the model is very small, so it's very easy to update the weights. And since with the software stack already supporting swapping models easily without changing the rest of the pipeline. So the overall approach is using synthetic data for coverage, real data for grounding, and the room for mission-specific adaptations. So we designed a training pipeline which is very easy to use and very reproducible. So at a practical level, training is intentionally simple. Just one command, you start a run, apply the configure augmentations, and save the best checkpoint automatically. That makes it easy to rerun experiments and compare results without a lot of the manual setup. So the augmentation strategy is also very important. Lunar perception is highly sensitive to lighting and visual ambiguities. So we including control transforms such as rotations, brightness, and the contrast variation, and the sensor style noise. So these are meant to improve the robustness without changing the underlying terrain semantics. So we support both online and offline augmentations. Online augmentations using during the training because the model sees fresh variation every epoch. The offline augmentation is useful when we want to fix an expanded data set for inspection, benchmarking, and also control the experimental comparison. So this pipeline is very easy to run and very reproducible by default. So it is designed for a semantic experimentation rather than this like one-off training runs. And we trained the model once, and then we export it onto different runtime to make sense, depends on the target environment. So in development, this is usually using a PyTorch, but for deployment, the main target is a TensorRT on a JSON. So the important design choice is that the rest of the perception nodes does not have to change when we switch runtimes. So we keep a common inference interface. So the segmentation component can move from PyTorch during the development to TensorRT in deployment with minimal integration churn. The separation mattered because it let us debug in a familiar environment first and then optimize for edge performance without rewriting the surrounding application logic. So for JSON deployment, we're using FP16 as the primary target because it typically offers a good reduction in memory and compute cost. And also its accurate impact is very, it still needs to measure some the accuracy in the deployment model, but the TensorRT gave us an additional runtime optimization that we need for onboard use. So next, we're going to basically, this is the LiDAR, this is the LiDAR. So we're talking basically using a LiDAR measurement rather than just the semantic itself. So the first job for the LiDAR is to turn it into a very usable local obstacle map. So we downsample it to keep it runtime predictable, then separate the point into likely grounds and obstacle bands using a height in the gravity-aligned local frame. This produces a local grid based on the geometry alone. And then it's alignment. So both the camera grid and the LiDAR grid are built locally around the rover, but planning may need a larger rolling or persistent map. So the EKF, the extended Kalman filters, provide the transform between the rover frame and the world frame using odometry and the IMU updates. This is where it allows the local observation to be registered consistently over time instead of being treated as a disconnected snapshots. So one design choice here is to have a conservative map maintenance. So new obstacles observation are applied immediately while cleaning an obstacle that require a more consistent evidence. And this is very intentional and safety driven. And this is where the geometry and the semantic comes together. So LiDAR tells us where the physical presence around the rover and where it is. The cameras add a terrain meaning by helping distinguish them. So we fuse these two local grids into a single traversability map. And the LiDAR carries more weight because the safe navigation depends first on the geometry, while the camera improves the terrain interpretation and the route qualities. The camera-derived grid is a recompute from each new image into the rover frame, and then we maintain a larger rolling or persistent map. That map may accumulate over time, but the vision projection itself is updated continuously. And we also support a graceful degradation. So if one perception source goes stale, the fusion node can fall back to the remaining source in a reduced capability mode with conservative safety limits. And this is where basically from the mapping to the planning. So once we having this fused traversability map, so the rest autonomy pipeline separate into three responsibilities: planning, path following, and safety. So the planner chooses the route through the current map. The controller turns the route into a motion command. And the safety system can override both the rover state when it crossing into a hazard threshold. The planner uses an incremental method so it can react to a new obstacle information without recomputing and everything from scratch. That is important on the constrained hardware where the latency matters. And the controller then follows the path with a simple, predictable tracking that reduces the speed when heading arrow is large. And the most important point is the slide is the architecture separation. Safety is not solely depending on the vision model. It monitors critical signals directly and it can stop the rover even if the higher level perception or planning degrades. And we still have a lot of open challenges. I think one thing that previous presenter already mentioned is the sim-to-real generalization. So synthetic data is extremely useful, but it cannot fully capture a real lunar imagery. And let's say, for example, I want to run this rover in a new environment, such as this room, then I will have to prepare a new data set. And so also the camera artifacts, the dust, the reflection effects, and the mission-specific lighting all introduce a gap between the training and deployment. Real imagery helps, but there is a very limited number of them, and so it's hard to creating a very accurate data set for the real mission. And the second is environmental robustness. The thermal swing can shift camera calibration over time, and the dust can gradually degrade optical qualities. Those effects matters because the segmentation performance depends not just on the one model, but and also depends on the stability of the sensing systems. There is also a hardware transition issues. Some sensor we're using for testing on the terrestrial is not a good flight choices, such as the perception stack, and it needs to be adaptable to a different sensor configuration, such as a solid state LiDAR. For example, we're currently using cheap Raspberry LiDAR, which is useful for Earth-space testing, but in a flight system, it needs a different space-appropriate ranging hardware that better align for the mission environment. Oops, sorry. And the third challenge is the quantization on device validation. We're using FP16 is the main target today, but any further quantization due to the power consumption or the onboard computing, it needs to be checked carefully because the small losses in the boundary quality can be a matter for the navigations. So the model accuracy alone is not enough. We need a validation on the full deployed system under the sensing, the environmental runtime condition that actually matters for a lunar rover. And yeah, this is the QR code if you're interested in using the, check out the repo. There's the mask files and all the segmentation training and also the full autonomy stack, which is still working in progress. So yeah, we're basically using an established segmentation architecture scaling for a resource-constrained Lunar Rover platform and the package in a way that's practical to train, deploy, and to integrate into a larger autonomy stacks. So the goal is to providing a very usable pipeline from training to augmentation and through explore, deployment, and system integration. So yeah, if anyone's interested in collaboration, contribution, yeah, we're very welcome. So yeah, and thank you for your time. I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Sam. We have an online question. Can you speak to the intended compute target for this pipeline?
The compute target is well, we're targeting, right now is about like a JSON Orin class, approximately between like 40 to 67 flops.
Go ahead.
Hello, thank you for the presentation, very interesting. Have you also explored having more than one DNN running, maybe one per sensor, instead of having one big one for everything? Just asking, it's not.
We were considering that, but for now we just want to basically processing with basically single camera, single LiDARs, and see how the result goes. But we do want to add an additional sensor. I think definitely can help with basically the deployment process. And definitely, I think that the more data usually is more helpful.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Go ahead in the middle.
Hi, Sam. Thanks for the presentation. Really cool. Question to like the human ConOps. It seems like the rover would run pretty independently. So what would the like human in the loop aspect would be? Would they like set a waypoint, or because it seems like the rover runs pretty autonomously?
So right now for this, the software, the goal is to, once it's landed and you having a defined area of exploration, and then you kind of just like set it loose. The goal is you still want to have a human in the loop, because right now, even with the communication delay, like it might run into issue unexpectedly, especially in the harsh like lighting or weather lighting conditions. So like this is only set for basically, let's say a 10 by 10 like field around the landing area for exploration.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thanks, Sam. We have someone typing in the chat, so we'll just give them a second to finish up.
Yeah, and special thanks because this is open source, and so we had support from some open source space foundations, and the IHS Maker Club is the high school team that helped with the maskings, and the mission control is they gave us some ideas regarding the data set, and JOps as they help us with the simulations. And yeah, Cal Poly Pomona providing some of the compute for us to running training and simulation.
Okay, the question came in. Can the models have memory on detections made in previous executions?
So I think that means a continuous learning.
I think so.
Yeah, so that currently is not in the pipeline, but we definitely want to explore this capability, especially if we have a multiple rovers, they can basically sharing the data and help it basically creating a larger map.
Thanks. Yeah. All right, give it up for Sam Yu from Lothan Space.